Sunday, the 29th of April, 1945, 1 week before the end of World War II in Europe. The US 7th Army's 45th Infantry Division liberates Dachau, the first regular concentration camp built by the Nazi government. The soldiers smell not only human excrement, but also decaying bodies, causing many of them to cry or vomit, as they find piles of impossibly malnourished corpses, more than 30 railroad cars filled with thousands of dead bodies, and 30,000 survivors, most of them severely emaciated, who look like walking skeletons. Some of them were even subjected to cruel and painful pseudo-medical experiments performed by one of the most sadistic and morally corrupted Nazi doctors. His name is Sigmund Rascher. Sigmund Rascher was born on the 12th of February 1909 in Munich, then part of the German Empire. He was the third child of Dr. Hans August Rascher, whose brother was a musician Sigurd Rascher. His father was a committed supporter of the anthroposophist Rudolf Steiner, and in 1921 participated in Steiner's first medical course. Young Sigmund attended the first Waldorf school in Stuttgart, a school based on Steiner's anthroposophist approach to education. He came under the influence of Ehrenfried Pfeiffer, who believed in the influence of cosmic rhythms on life processes. He completed his secondary education at Konstanz in 1930, and the same year he began to study medicine at the University of Freiburg. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg, and a few months later, Sigmund Rascher joined the Nazi Party. After completing his preliminary examination, he worked for his now divorced father in Basel, Switzerland, and continued his medical studies there. In October 1934, he returned to Germany to study at the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich. In 1936, he passed the state medical examination there, obtained his doctorate, and joined the SA. The same year, he also met his future wife, Karoline Diehl, who was a former cabaret singer. She was a widow as her first husband, a theatre director Oskar Diehl, died in 1929. Karoline, who was born in 1893, was 15 years older than Rascher and had valuable contacts at the highest levels of politics. In the early days of the Nazi Party, she helped Heinrich Himmler and kept in touch with the future Reichsführer SS since then. Thanks to her close connection to Himmler, who was supposedly her ex-lover, she was able to offer Rascher opportunities for career advancement in the Nazi state. On her recommendation, Himmler received Rascher in person for the first time in April 1939. A week after first meeting Himmler, Rascher presented a paper, Report on the Development and Solution to Some of the Reichsführer's Assigned Tasks, during a discussion held on the 24th of April 1939. Rascher became involved in testing a plant extract as a cancer treatment. Professor Kurt Blomer, the Deputy Health Minister and Plenipotentiary for Cancer Research, favored testing the extract in mice, but Rascher insisted on using human test subjects. Himmler took Rascher aside, and a human cancer testing station was established at Dachau concentration camp. Dachau was the first regular concentration camp established by the Nazi government in March 1933, less than 2 months after Hitler became the Chancellor. During the first year, the camp had a capacity of 5,000 prisoners. Initially, the internees were primarily German communists, social democrats, trade unionists, and other political opponents of the Nazi regime. However, over time, other groups were also interned at Dachau, such as Jehovah's Witnesses, Roma and Sinti people, homosexuals, repeat criminal offenders, as well as so-called asocials, whom the regime incarcerated because they could not or would not find gainful employment. During the early years, relatively few Jews were interned in Dachau, and then only usually because they belonged to one of the aforementioned groups or had completed prison sentences after being convicted for violating the 1935 Nuremberg laws, which put Nazi ideas about race into law. In early 1937, the SS, using prisoner labor, began construction of a large complex of buildings on the grounds of the original camp. Prisoners were forced to do this work, starting with the destruction of the old munitions factory under terrible conditions. The construction was officially completed in mid-August 1938. 1 month prior to the Second World War, which began on the 1st of September 1939 with the German invasion of Poland, Rascher had been conscripted into the Luftwaffe, the German air forces. Because of Rascher's servile and ingratiating approach to Himmler, his connections were so strong that practically every superior trembled in fear of the intriguing Rascher, who consequently held a position of enormous power. In October 1939, Rascher switched from the SA to the SS, and in order to marry Karoline, he needed approval from Himmler. This was part of the strict control and regulation of the personal lives of SS members, as Himmler aimed to ensure that their marriages aligned with the racial and ideological principles of the Nazi regime. Because of Karoline's age, Himmler was initially against the two marrying, as a marriage with numerous children was not to be expected. The Nazi regime encouraged the birth of children deemed racially valuable in order to increase Germany's Aryan population. In 1939, however, Karoline and Rascher had an illegitimate child, and when Karoline once again reported that she had become pregnant again, Himmler finally authorized the marriage, which took place in July 1942. Himmler supported the couple, and after the second child would transfer them 165 Reichsmarks each month. He also sent parcels containing fruit, chocolate, and other gifts. Karoline returned the favor with family photos and asked for Rascher to be given a better job. Rascher would also write frequently to Himmler, requesting money, tax reductions, fresh fruit, furniture, fruit juices, a new apartment, and even slave servant girls. Rascher suggested in early 1941 that high-altitude, low-pressure experiments be carried out on human beings. While taking a course in aviation medicine at Munich, he wrote Himmler a letter in which he said that this course included research into high-altitude flight, and it was regretted that no tests with humans had been possible, as such experiments were highly dangerous, and nobody volunteered for them. Rascher asked Himmler to place human subjects at his disposal, stating quite frankly that the experiments might prove fatal, but that previous tests made with monkeys had been unsatisfactory. The letter was answered by Rudolf Brandt, Himmler's adjutant, who informed Rascher that prisoners would be made available. Rascher subsequently wrote back to Brandt asking for permission to carry out his experiments at Dachau, and plans for the experiments were developed at a conference in early 1942, attended by Rascher and members of the Luftwaffe medical service. The experiments were carried out in spring and summer of the same year, using a portable pressure chamber supplied by the Luftwaffe. The victims were locked in the chamber, the interior pressure of which was then lowered to a level corresponding to very high altitudes. The pressure could be very quickly altered, allowing Rascher to simulate the conditions which would be experienced by a pilot free-falling from altitude without oxygen. After viewing a report of one of the fatal experiments, Himmler remarked that if a subject should survive such treatment, he should be pardoned to life imprisonment. Rascher, however, replied to Himmler that the victims had to date been merely Poles and Soviets, and that he believed they should be given no amnesty of any sort. 80 out of the 200 subjects died outright because of the experiment, and the rest were murdered. Rascher also conducted so-called freezing experiments on behalf of the Luftwaffe on 300 test subjects without their consent. The experiments were conducted at Dachau after the high-altitude experiments had concluded. The purpose was to determine the best way of warming German pilots who had been forced down in the North Sea and suffered hypothermia. Rascher's victims were forced to remain outdoors naked in freezing weather for up to 14 hours or kept in a tank of ice water for 3 hours, their pulse and internal temperature measured through a series of electrodes. Warming of the victims was then attempted by different methods, most usually and successfully by immersion in hot water. At least one witness, an assistant to some of these procedures, later testified that some victims were thrown into boiling water for rewarming. Himmler attended some of the experiments and told Rascher he should go to the North Sea region and find out how ordinary people there warmed victims of extreme cold. Himmler reportedly said he thought that a fisherwoman could well take her half-frozen husband into her bed and revive him in that manner, and added that everyone believed animal warmth had a different effect than artificial warmth. 4 Romani women were sent from Ravensbrück concentration camp, and warming was attempted by placing the hypothermic victim between 2 naked women. Rascher also experimented with the effects of Polygal, a substance made from beet and apple pectin, which aided blood clotting. He predicted that the preventative use of Polygal tablets would reduce bleeding from gunshot wounds sustained during combat or during surgery. Subjects were given a Polygal tablet and shot through the neck or chest, or their limbs amputated without anesthesia. Rascher published an article on his experience of using Polygal without detailing the nature of human trials, and also set up a company to manufacture the substance, staffed by prisoners. Additional human experiments were conducted at Dachau from July to September 1944, when inmates were subjected to tests on the potability of seawater. The doctors forced roughly 90 Romani prisoners to drink only seawater, whilst also depriving them of food. The Romani inmates became so dehydrated that they reportedly licked floors after they had been mopped just to get a drop of fresh water. The experiments caused enormous pain and suffering, and resulted in serious bodily injury. Rascher, who also allegedly collected human skin to make saddles, was one of Himmler's favorites, but this was about to change in late 1943. Attempting to please Himmler through demonstrating that population growth could be accelerated by extending female childbearing age, Rascher publicized the fact that his wife Karoline had given birth to 3 children even after reaching 48 years of age, and Himmler used a photograph of Rascher's family as propaganda material. However, during her 4th pregnancy, Karoline Rascher was arrested while attempting to kidnap a baby. An investigation later revealed that her other 3 children had been either purchased or kidnapped. In addition to acting as an accessory in the kidnappings of the 3 infants, Rascher was also accused of financial irregularities, the murder of his former lab assistant, and scientific fraud. In December 1943, Rascher's lab assistant and housekeeper, Julie Muschler, who had once lived in an apartment with the Raschers, disappeared while on a mountain trip with the couple. When her body was found in April 1944, both the Raschers came under strong suspicion of murder. Himmler, enraged that the Raschers had exploited him, had both of them sent without trial to concentration camps. Sigmund was sent to Buchenwald, and Karoline was sent to Ravensbrück. Both were held in bunkers meant for special prisoners. 51-year-old Karoline was executed by hanging in Ravensbrück in late April 1945. Her husband remained in Buchenwald following his arrest in 1944 until the camp's evacuation in April 1945, and then taken to Dachau. Sigmund Rascher was 36 years old when he was executed on the 26th of April 1945, on Himmler's direct order, just 3 days before the camp was liberated by American troops. Rascher was killed by an SS officer who shot him through the cell observation and food delivery door, and then kicked his body with the words, "You pig! Now you've got the punishment you deserve." There were no tears shed for Sigmund Rascher. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.